Join us by the fireside for our evening tales of true life's strange experiences with things that lie beyond the veil of the known and into the misty depths of the mysterious and unknown. The terror near the lake. I try to not talk to too many people about this. I'm a quiet sort of person, and I also hope to forget this experience to a certain degree, and I don't really like talking about it much. But recently, I decided to share this. So anyway, background. I grew up in a large city in eastern Canada. All of my life at that point had been spent around noise and traffic and lights and just, tons of people. It made the concept of quiet solitude very appealing to me, and I'd learned to seek these things out and appreciate them whenever I could, whenever I could take a break. So when the opportunity arose to visit my parents' home, I just took it. This is because they grew up in the far eastern part of Canada on the island of Newfoundland. Not even from the big city there, but from a small town. It's one of those towns that you can see the whole area by just standing on the biggest street within it and looking out. A remote part of a remote island in a remote country seemed like gold to me, especially at that time in my life when there was so much stress. I was in my early 20s and I had just, got out of college and aimed at a career, intent on making my mark. But the city I was in wasn't particularly accepting of my skills or the language I spoke, so finding work was kind of difficult and depressing. I gamed a lot more than I should have done. I ate too much, I drank too much. Everyone thought it was a good idea for a change of pace. Healthy, perhaps. Of the trip, I will only describe our descent, for it's one of the most opportune use of the word I will ever know. If you've never been in a small plane at night flying above a sea of clouds during a full moon, then you are missing one of the few plane-based pleasures available to people in the era of manned flight. It's absolutely magical. The sky looked like wet black tarmac in the headlights. So many stars. There seemed to be more than the sky could hold. It was just incredible. Hovering in the middle of them was this spotlight of the moon, and it was almost too bright to look at. These things together lit the rolling clouds beneath the plane. It looked like pillow stuffing spread out horizon to horizon, all cast in this beautiful silver blue light. It felt like I could just walk out onto it. And it was only a few feet below the fuselage. It moved and breathed and changed as we flew over it. It really is just a perfect memory and experience. So then we drove down through that perfection and into darkness. We arrived at a small airport outside of their hometown. We could have driven from St. John's, but we decided not to because overnight driving in Newfoundland is quite dangerous for people not accustomed to small roads and wildlife that still remains mostly wild. If your car hits a moose going at 60 kilometers per hour, the moose won't be what gets scraped off the road. We still had some driving to do, though. Their hometown was not where we would be staying, but at a been in the family for years cabin about 30 minutes away in the woods. My lifestyle back on the mainland, fueled by disappointment and depression, had given me two things I couldn't shake when I landed: a desire to be outside and a completely messed up internal clock. I was so used to playing games online until 4 a.m. every night that 2 a.m. felt pretty early. So when my parents went to bed, I let them know I was going for a walk. They understood, and Newfoundland is not known for violent crimes in the woods, so there was no real concern. I took a flashlight and a walking stick, mostly to avoid turning an ankle or for just swatting away any unwanted attention from local, fauna and stuff. Not that a broomstick, literally, would do much against an aggressive animal, but if you've ever gone walking anywhere not fully tamed, it just feels good to have something in your hands. So off I went. Now, ever since our descent, I've been concerned. There was this general sense of tension, and I just attributed it to going to a new place, no real creature comforts except maybe some books and a lack of computer and technology. Maybe it was just the absence of that amazing scene above the clouds. Whatever it was, that feeling just kind of came over me strongly, several levels up, just a few minutes from the house. So anyway, I just sort of pushed it aside and I figured I'd get acclimatized shortly. And this was a clearly defined walking path that I knew circled around the small lake next to the cabin and would bring me right back there in a couple of kilometers. Probably a 45-minute walk if I kept a good pace, an hour if I was a bit more casual. The whole way around, I would be able to see the cabin, so I wouldn't lose my orientation. All in all, I'm trying to say that I had my bases covered. I even had a light, as the moon I'd seen earlier was still overhead, poking out from the overcast sky regularly enough to see. The clouds were fast as they can be so close to the sea. So I was walking down the path, and the woods were to my right, and they were thick and kind of impenetrable pine, and to my left, the small lake. It was lit like, this glossy black frosted glass by the wind and the moon. Solo walks are great for thinking, and so I just let my mind wander and I tried to relax. The path was well kept, and the stick and flashlight were utterly unnecessary, really. At some, undefinable point in the walk, I felt like someone walk over my grave. You know those slow chills when you can feel the wave of goosebumps appear, flowing up your back and your neck and forearms, and everything just sort of goes tight? I realized I was staring at the lake, at the white noise of the reflected light, and not paying attention to the words. And then I just became irrationally certain that there was something terrible in the woods. I turned on my flashlight and I turned to look, and it was like sinking in a hot tub. The goosebumps just vanished, and the woods seemed completely unremarkable, mollified even. So I continued walking. Then this happened again, that exact same feeling. And once again, I realized I was absent-mindedly staring at the lake. At this point, I noticed the cabin almost directly across from me beyond the lake. I am about as far as I am going to get from the house during my walk, and all I want to is to be back there with one of my books suddenly. As this thought crosses my mind, I notice that a small part of the reflection on the lake is missing. It's just gone, like someone went over it with a Sharpie or something. So I looked at the spot, kept staring at it, and focused on it. Of all the bad decisions in my life, that's the one I would wish to take back the most. And while my Homo sapien brain is trying to assign some reason for this absence of reflection, half-sunk boat, thicket of reeds, weird stone outcropping or something, my reptilian brain is telling me to get the hell out of there as fast as I can. The spot is getting bigger. It is something, man-shaped, walking out of the water towards me, very clearly walking. And it's backlit by the moon. I was suddenly frozen. I couldn't move. It was getting closer to shore when I realized I still have my flashlight, one of the big ones people in cabins like to keep around. So I dropped my stick. I fumbled with the flashlight, not breaking eye contact with this thing. I find the switch, which was right there where it should be, under my thumb. But hey, panic, and shine it at this man shape. Of course, there's nothing there at all, just water and moonlit reflections all the way back to the cabin. I swear I stood there for 5 minutes, motionless, unable to move, except for my eyes, which were grid-searching the entire lake. And finally, I decide I'm imagining things. Despite every inch of me still screaming to run, I decide I will head back the way I came at double speed. So I flick the light switch off and I get my night sight back. And the thing is exactly where it would be if it hadn't stopped approaching. Right where I had been pointing my light. Close enough now to start obscuring part of the cabin. Literally visible in the dark but not in the light. I froze for some amount of time again. Probably only a few seconds, but it felt like a lot longer. It got closer. Lake water moves noisily but regularly. You watch reflection on it, and it's just noise. There are no regular waves or anything. It's just this constant shimmer there. The edges of this thing were like that. It was hard to notice at first because just the lake was behind my view of it. But as it eclipsed the cabin and some of the ground, I then very clearly saw its edges move just like the lake. Some people say that scribbles have, some kind of static. I felt like these were synonymous descriptions of what I saw. At about 10 feet, I realized there wasn't going to be any kind of stopping. It wasn't going to stop and say something or resolve itself into some drunk a-hole or anything I wanted to deal with. So in lieu of messing myself, I dropped the flashlight, and I heard it break, and sprinted back to the cabin. I fell once, skinning my shin pretty roughly, but made it back to the cabin in about 10 minutes. It wasn't in great shape. I get back to the house. My head was pounding. My ears are roaring. I'm nauseous. I just feel sick. I stumble in and I collapse into the downstairs bedroom. It's a 2-floor cabin. Parents are upstairs. They are undisturbed by my noises, and I just collapse into bed. Then I notice my one window is framing the lake like a painting. Everything just outside the window is pitch black. The moon is on the other side of the house. I decide I can't deal with that, so I go back out to the main room and I just close all the doors and windows I can see, and I sleep on the sofa. At some point, hours later, crashing from the adrenaline and the run, I just fell asleep deeply. Next morning, my parents woke me up, coming downstairs, and they asked me why I was sleeping on the couch, fully clothed, and why my jeans were ripped. I was too self-conscious at this point to say anything close to the truth, so I just said I fell, lost the flashlight, and had to come back and just fell asleep on the couch on accident. They bought it. I didn't sleep well, or much at all, so I decided to go to bed and get some actual sleep. I walked over, opened the door to my room, and there, lying perfectly aligned on the bed, is the broken flashlight, covered in dirt, and the broomstick, side by side like matchsticks. Window is locked. Very creepy indeed, and it definitely sounds like the creepiest part of this story is the going up into your room and finding the flashlight and the stick right there. That's quite terrifying indeed. The haunted family. This may seem unreal, but what I'm about to say is 100% true, and I swear to that. When my mother was young, she was very sick and she needed medicine. Not all people in the area where we lived like Native Americans, which we are. So we relied on a local medicine man. Years later, we discovered that the medicine she was getting wasn't helping her anymore because she wasn't sick. She was haunted. She remembers seeing a demonic figure when she was very young, but at the time, she didn't know if it was real or not. This happened from when she could start to remember things up to when she was about 5. Well, 30 years later, that demonic figure started showing up again. But I know she wasn't just imagining it because I could see it and hear it. And sometimes I could even feel something like some sign of its presence was there. She started having nightmares, and we all knew what was happening. We decided to move back to our reservation to see if the problem or haunting was with the house, but it wasn't. No matter where she went, this thing just followed her. It followed us. I'll be very honest with you, for a long time I thought she was faking it. Until one night. My mom used to cope with this haunting by drinking tea and coloring. This night, she was coping in the living room, and nothing seemed to be happening, so none of us expected that anything would happen. But suddenly, we heard this screaming in the living room coming from my mom, and we all ran to see what was wrong. She was crying and screaming that something was scratching her back. I didn't believe her until I lifted the back of her shirt and saw it with my own eyes. She was being scratched. There weren't just scratches already there, but scratch marks kept appearing while I was watching, and they were big and long and red and were all over her. I was just terrified. I ran to grab some sweetgrass, and I was across the house when I heard the door open. It turns out my mom was walking towards the lake. And keep in mind that it's a Canadian winter, so it was about minus 35 degrees. Not sure if Fahrenheit or centigrade, but they'd actually be very close in this case. When she walked outside barefoot and wearing nothing but her pajamas, and I was very concerned. After it happened, she didn't remember it, and to this day, she doesn't remember that night. But I still remember everything. We're afraid that it's starting to happen again, and she's having these brutal nightmares, and the entire family is starting to see black shadow figures everywhere in the house. Another terrifying sign of this is that we have a cat, and from time to time we'll notice it staring at a fixed point as if it's looking at someone or something. And then it will run away as if it's terrified. So I don't know what to do. We're looking at different ways to handle this. But, I just wanted to share this because it's helping me to cope with it. Definitely sounds like a increasing haunting activity of some kind of malicious presence, and certainly something that you need to get help for. Maybe talking to some people in your community or something, might certainly help you to find someone who can, bring some relief to your family. A black mass. This started to happen when I was in my last apartment 3 years ago, and it's been happening in my current place as well. There is something that's following me around, or it stays close to me all the time wherever I'm living. I saw it the first time as I was walking to the bathroom in my apartment. My bedroom door was open, and I glanced in the room and I saw this black, solid mass that was just kind of standing, so to speak, in the center of the room. It wasn't doing anything, it was just hanging out in the middle of this well-lit room. I kind of glanced at it a second time. Nothing. I'm coming back from the bathroom and my bedroom door was closed. I opened the door, turned back to the living room, and the mass is over near my guinea pig. The guinea pig is freaking the hell out. He never makes any noise. And the mass fades away into nothingness. I would see this mass constantly out of the corner of my eye, and then I'd look and there'd be nothing. One morning, a couple of months later, I woke up randomly in the night. My bedroom light was on. It wasn't when I fell asleep. So I got up, I turned it off, and I heard something hit the floor in front of me. The guinea pig's cage is on its side, and he is sitting in the middle of the living room. His cage was on the floor, and there was no way it could have fallen over. I moved into a new house eventually. Everything was fine for the first 4 months, and then sounds started happening. I heard things walking up the stairs. I could hear doors opening and closing. The refrigerator door is open when I go into the kitchen, And this continued for 3 straight months. 4 months ago, after about a year of nothing, I was sitting at my desk and I was messing around on the computer. The bathroom light right next to my office turned on, and an oblong shadow just suddenly appears on the wall. I froze. I watched it disappear. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. I opened my eyes, and the light is off. I feel like I'm going crazy. I walk to the kitchen to get a glass of water. I turn to go through the living room, and hovering there is the exact same black mass I saw before in my apartment. And then it fades out. There is a light from my rechargeable battery pack on the wall directly outside my office, on the wall across the hall from the bathroom. It glows blue. Every time for the past 2 months, the light will go on. I'll look at it, and it will slowly fade back on. The light isn't ever supposed to turn off. After turning back on, the stairs creak as if someone is walking up them, and the guinea pig again freaks out a few seconds later. His cage is in my bedroom. I don't know what to do exactly, but this thing is starting to get worse, it seems, and I don't know why it's following me around.